Hey guys, it's Dom here, back with another video on Legends about custom cards, but today we got something different because I'm not actually coming up with completely original ideas. I'm looking at cards that are in the campaign and basically just twisting them a bit so they work in multiplayer. Now there's obviously a lot of cards in the campaign and I've had a look through all of them that aren't in the multiplayer and seen that some of them are just too weak, some of them are too strong, but there's a few which with a few tweaks could really easily fit in with the multiplayer. Some examples, the ones which are just too weak and require like different stats, are Gust of Wind, because it's a 2 cost to move one creature. That needs to be like a 0 cost. Bandit Ambush is a 5 cost to summon 2 1/1 units. That's just a bit worthless. And we also have High Elf Soldier, who's a 4 cost, 3 power and 3 health card, which just wouldn't get played. Some overpowered ones would be cards like Rage of Narfin, which is a 2 cost complete removal card. Sightless Pit, which is a 0 cost support, which basically means all your creatures of cover are massively buffed in power. And Temple's Blessing, which if the values were significantly lowered, could probably fit into multiplayer. But these aren't the ones I'm looking at today, and let's get into the ones which we'll be properly analysing. So first we have Harvest, which in the campaign is a 0 cost support, which is indestructible, and at the end of each player's turn, if they have no cards in their hand, they draw 3 cards. It's obviously a very nice effect for what's going on in one of the missions, and it's all about just kind of emptying your hand every turn so you can use this effect. But there are some decks which would genuinely kind of like a card like this, if it wasn't so neutral and actually helped you. So what I've tried to change it to is a 3 cost epic support, which at the end of your turn, if you have no cards in your hand, you will draw 1 card. So this would be something that's really nice for decks which are really getting through their deck. Yeah, I've said deck a lot of times, but you'd play this. You could play up to 3 of these if you found them, but because they're epics, they are quite costly on your collection. So you have to kind of choose wisely if you want it or not. And it would mean that if you do have all 3 down, that at the end of your turn you could be drawing up to 3 cards. But then obviously, by the time you've got that off, it's quite likely that one of them's been destroyed or something else has happened to it. But it does allow that kind of potential that the original card had. Right, so next we have the Moonstone Relic, a 0 cost support which is ongoing, and when your opponent loses a rune, put a random 0 cost card in your hand. This isn't a campaign card, it's an arena boss battle card, I think. And it is very nice for what you'd assume would be a Swindler's Market deck. But obviously, because of the way it is, it would also seem a bit busted if you could have 3 copies of these, and every time you destroy a rune, gain 3 more cards, and with the correct Swindler setup, that would just be an easy OTK. So I decided to make it a 5 cost unique legendary support, and it would basically take up that final slot for those Swindler's Market decks. So they destroy a rune, draw a 0 cost card, can play that, do an extra 3 damage and gain an extra 3 health with the correct setup. And it would still be very powerful, hence the reason it's a 5 cost. And those Swindler's decks are quite fast paced, get going early. This would kind of fit into it, but it would still require a few turns setup, just waiting till you can get the Magicka to play it. So it would have a bit more balance. So next we have the Obnoxious Guest, who is a 2 cost Breton, who is 0 power and 2 health. And at the start of your turn, you take 2 damage. When Obnoxious Guest moves, you give him to your opponent. Now this actually seems like something which would fit really well in agility decks, but he's intelligence, meaning you'd have to be running something like Assassin or Telvanni just to be able to play him. And if you're playing triple attribute, that means you got a bigger deck and a lower chance of getting this. So I thought, if he was to come into the game, it'd need to be a 1 cost, just so it'd be easier for you to afford your movement cards on the same turn. And, you know, let's make him agility as well, so he just fits in with the rest of the movement cards. This might seem quite powerful, but in the end of the day, you are actually giving a card to your opponent when you're getting off his effect, which means that they could either sacrifice him for some synergy, give him items as an extra card to be a bit of a beat stick. It's something which is a bit interesting and has like a different level of play to it. Right, so next we have the Crystal Tower Acolyte, a 3 cost high elf, which has 2 power and 1 health, and when summoned will deal 2 damage to your opponent. Honestly, I think this is actually quite a nice card and could very easily fit into high elf decks or control decks, or ones that just trying to do direct damage to your opponent. So I feel like this card doesn't actually need to change. It's just you'd probably need to kind of be careful because it would do a lot of powerful synergies with cards which just reactivate summon abilities and could probably cause this just to completely annihilate your opponent if you could get this ability off 15 times. Which sounds a bit ridiculous, but then with the correct cards is very much possible. Right, now we have the Spawning Pool, a free cost support card which at the start of your turn would summon a 1/1 Foraging Mud Crab, which is just that card on the right. So this is a bit like the Imperial City, but instead it spawns Mud Crabs and is a bit cheaper. Now because Imperials have a lot of synergy, it is fair for that to be a 5-cost card, but with Mud Crabs there's not as much in the game to do with it, so this lower cost would be fair, but I feel like it would still need a bit more of a kind of revamp to how it would work. Say, let's make it a 4-cost card. Instead of make it at the start of your turn, make it at the end, just to guarantee that at least one Foraging Mud Crab gets summoned. And if we give it Last Gasp, give all friendly Mud Crabs +1/+1, that would be on the field, not in your hand and deck and graveyard and whatnot, just the field. Something like that would just give it a bit more power and make it a bit of a threat if it's destroyed at the wrong time. And as Mud Crabs aren't really much of a dangerous attribute at the moment, it would definitely kind of be a bit of support that would really help the archetype go a bit further. And it would make the most out of Foraging Mud Crab, which is yet to be seen in multiplayer. And finally we have a card which is an archetype which barely ever gets used, and that is Quame Egg. So this is a 1-cost egg with no power and free health, and after 2 turns will hatch into a giant Quame, which is a 4-cost 4/4 with no ability. And, you know, works well with cards like Quame Queen, and that's about it. So I thought a card like this, it definitely needs a bit of a rework, but if they added more support for this very, very minuscule archetype, it could actually be something which is really cool. So I thought, let's change it to something a bit more like Corner Club Gambler and have it be a bit of a take a risk kind of card. So what it does now is it would be a 2-cost, 0 power and 2 health, so it is a bit more committing to play. But if you do manage to keep it alive for one of your opponent's turns, you can choose to either transform it into a Hive Defender or a Hive Warrior. And it's this ability to kind of choose what you're going into, which would make it really good and something which is definitely worth running in a future Quame deck, but obviously something like that I don't see ever happening, especially with the game's state. So it's just a cool idea which could have been entered into the game, but yeah, no, if it could then also have like Queen Quame Eggs, and then they could go into Quame Queens and all those other fancy cards. But that's my video today. That's all I've got to really show to you guys. If you enjoyed me looking at cards which are already kind of in the game but not in the multiplayer, let me know if you want to see more like this. I kind of took a break from making these custom card videos because I felt like my last one just lacked a bit of creativity and was kind of a bit busted, but I have got something coming for this series, hopefully in a week or two. I'm not too sure, but when it does drop it's going to be really cool, and I'd just say look forward to that.